Welcome to another edition of Red Meat, our first non-convention edition. I'm Jim Geraghty, along with Mark Hemingway, and we're coming to you from the Washington Bureau of National Review. Today, we come at a point when a lot of conservatives are out on the ledge. Sales of razor blades are way up. Speculation of mass suicide over the state of the presidential debate, as if your IRA or your 401k wasn't putting you out on the ledge already. Mark, you were a financial reporter for 2 years, and so I'm a guy who's had a very steep learning curve trying to get up to speed on the concept of the bailout, what it does, whether it's a good idea, whether it's a bad idea, what the hell's in it, why are we giving money to Acorn, all that kind of stuff. We've seen, and this is going to clearly have a very big impact on the presidential race, the House voted it down earlier this week, surprising everybody. House Republicans are, we're definitely among the folks saying this is a bad idea. We don't want to go on board with it, or at least 2/3 of their caucus. Are we going to look back and say, aha, they were standing up for the right thing, and thank goodness they held this up? Or are people going to say, no, we needed emergency surgery, and these guys were haggling about the cost of the scalpel?
Well, that's a really tough question. I mean, the whole point of a market is that you have a whole bunch of individual actors, and the idea is that, collectively they'll, come up with the answer themselves. So, the idea that we're now in Congress, with a few hundred people, in this massive, financial market that we have, trying to figure out what the best course of action is a real big if. Certainly there's a problem. Certainly there's a lot of things that government can and should do. It's just a question, again, of how far they're willing to go. I mean, the first Paulson plan, as it was put forth, was pure unmitigated socialism. You were talking about essentially nationalizing a huge industry in the United States to the tune of nearly $1 trillion. So, frankly, I think that House Republicans are right to be concerned about an intervention. And frankly, no one knows what's going to happen. I mean, but the bottom line is, look, we could go into a recession for the next couple of years, whether we have the bailout or whether we don't have the bailout. If we have the bailout, people could be saying that, and we still end up with 8% unemployment and recession for 2 years, then people could be saying that we should have done more. The people saying we should have let the market work this out themselves. There were a lot of banks and things that clearly were doing fine until we artificially lowered rates for everyone else, and then you could have a situation where you have 8% unemployment for 2 years after you've done nothing, and everyone is scratching their heads and saying, "Oh my gosh, we should have done something."
Yeah. Just going to one of those cases of those three-handed economists on the one hand, on the other hand, and on this third biologically mutant hand that no one else has. I'm left with kind of a situation in which I get the feeling that this bailout was something that a lot of, at least the people in the leadership of both parties, felt was necessary, but nobody wanted to be on the hook for. They knew it was phenomenally unpopular. And I figure if you're a talk radio host, this is the best thing since amnesty.
Yeah.
This is, I'm reaching into your pocket, Mr. Taxpayer, and I'm giving it to Gordon Gekko, the guy from the Monopoly game with a little monocle, and they're laughing over mint juleps, watching polo, while laughing all the way to the bank.
What's weird about this is that we have the Ouroboros of political ideology here, where you have Michael Moore ranting on his website about how this is a coup by the rich, and then you also have your talk radio people at the same time on the right side that are screaming bloody murder about how this is a coup for the rich, and there is not a lot of sensible discussion about what the practical implications are and what necessarily to be done about it, and the problem is that no one right now has any credibility to speak about it. No one in Congress, because clearly there's a presidential election going on, and clearly there's elections going on right now. There's no real good way to discern whether anyone in the Congress is speaking for themselves and the taxpayer, rather than simply trying to worry about their political futures. No one trusts the Bush White House for good reason. No one trusts Henry Paulson because he's the former head of Goldman Sachs, and his first plan out of the gates was ridiculously ambitious and needlessly interventionist, and that I think even he would concede at this point in time. So that's the problem, is we need a leader right now that everyone can get behind and say, hey, this is what the real consequences are, and here are our options. But there's no real leadership.
That takes us to the presidential race, in which you've got two would-be leaders taking very drastically different approaches. McCain's I would describe as the hokey pokey we put our foot in, and we suspend our campaign, and we say we're postponing the debates. We take our foot out, we're not suspending our campaign, the debate goes on. We're going to Washington, we're going back to Mississippi, back and forth. And then on the other hand, you've got this arguably calmer, but I would say curiously and perhaps psychologically disturbingly level of detachment from it all, in which, say, Barack, we're spending $700 billion that you were going to put on healthcare and all of your priorities. Do you want in on this? No, you stay on the campaign trail. You keep doing what you're doing. Fair assessments, or?
You know, yes, I think that's an entirely fair assessment, and I am really baffled that Barack's feet haven't really been put more to the fire over this. It's not so much that, you know, McCain did the right thing. I mean, I think people are perfectly within reason to criticize him for this, you know, what a lot of people call a stunt. I mean, I'm not sure it was a stunt. I think that McCain sincerely believed what he was doing the right thing. It's a very McCain thing to do, what he did. Whether it's the right thing again, I don't know. But you know, Obama, you know, here's a guy that's been, you know, saying that he didn't make any calls to congressional Republicans. He didn't think, you know, it would influence, you know, things one way or the other. He didn't need to go back to Washington until the president summoned him and it was clear that Congress needed to take some sort of emergency action and hammer out some bipartisan plan. He's just unbelievably detached. And I think that is one of the big, still unresolved things about him in this election. And whether the McCain campaign can do anything about it, I don't know, is that Obama's still very much a cipher on all these issues. I mean, here's a guy who, you know, a year ago on the campaign trail was, you know, screaming, "Get out of Iraq now," that has now somehow between now and then endorsed every key component of the Bush foreign policy plan. Seems detached from the economic situation other than to make generic platitudes about how, you know, regular folks are hurting. It seems like a fertile line of attack, but McCain has the McCain campaign has been awfully disastrous for the last month.
McCain seems to want to focus on his comfort issue, which is talking about spending earmarks and stuff that isn't really.
Well, yeah, that is exactly. Look, this financial crisis did not arise overnight. I mean, at the very least, you can say when the Fed started pumping liquidity into the markets back in August of last year, I mean, it was pretty apparent there was going to be some sort of credit. There was already some credit crisis in existence, let alone one that would grow worse over time. The subprime thing has been going on for years now. So why is it that McCain in September, you know, before the presidential election in November, still can't get up in a debate and talk about economic issues besides spending?
Speaking of debates, there's another one coming up tomorrow night. Battling Joe Biden versus the Barracuda, Sarah Palin. This way, interesting levels of expectations of this, and clearly two very different styles. I've got a particularly gloomy assessment, but I want to get, you know, what you'd be looking for, Mark.
Well, you know, I don't know. It's a dual-edged sword for Sarah Palin. Basically, the expectations are such that, you know, if she shows up there and she's not, you know, dribbling cerebral spinal fluid out the corner of her mouth, she's gonna do just fine in the debate. On the other hand, even if she has a fine debate performance, if she says one thing that's, you know, can questionably be misinterpreted, people are going to pounce all over him. And just like the Katie Couric thing last night, I mean, Katie Couric asked her again, yet another gotcha question about what newspaper she reads, and she declined to name one by specifics. Now, here is a woman who worked in broadcast journalism. You think to tell me that she can't name a newspaper? I mean, it's just preposterous, you know, that people are seizing on these things at this point in time. I'm
going to have a bit of a bone to pick with you. I think she definitely should have named some.
Oh, I agree.
Should have named National Review. Should have said she reads my blog. No, but semi-seriously, when you don't answer that question, people come to the conclusion that you don't read them, and I don't think that's necessarily something to say. Look, we will see what happens tomorrow night. We'll have a bit more of a discussion perhaps afterwards here on Red Meat. I myself, a bit of a pessimist. I really think this is going to come down to very likable, but not terribly familiar with all of the issues on the side of Sarah Palin versus Joe Biden being his, you know, incoherent and blathering blowhard, who at the very least has a great deal of experience and has, you know, met every world leader. I think in a time of crisis, I think in a time when people feel uncertain, they'll go with the know-it-all blowhard. But I hope to be proven wrong. So anyway, I'm Jim Geraghty. This is Mark Hemingway. You've been watching another edition of Red Meat coming to you from National Review's Washington Bureau. Come back tomorrow night. We'll be talking about the vice presidential debate, who won, who lost, and what to expect. Thanks for joining us.